baking more, following a very strict recipe, where like unscripted is more like cooking. You know, you can throw a little of this and you can throw a little of that in, like measurements don't always matter.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, I'm Jeff.
I'm Shaw, and welcome to Chopping It Up.
We're just two editors kind of talking about the art and the craft of editing. Your first question would probably be, since this is our first show, why the hell should we listen to these guys? Well, we feel like we have some kind of expertise in this field. My friend Shaw here has edited such shows as Life Below Zero, First Alaskans, and Next Generation, Paranormal State, and My Unorthodox Life.
And Jeff here has edited great scripted content here. We got Dave, American Auto, Acapulco, Speechless, and my personal favorite, Community.
This whole podcast, we're basically going to be talking to editors about their process, how they got into the industry, kind of stuff along those lines. And speaking of that, who is this week's guest?
This week, we have an Emmy Award winner. She just won an Emmy for Black Lady Sketch Show, and her name is Malinda Zehner Guerra.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, yes. She's also cut on shows Naked and Afraid and American Horror Stories, and my personal favorite, Ghost Hunters.
And just to let everybody know that we recorded this before the Emmys, so when she's talking about the Emmy that she was nominated for, she actually won. All right, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. All right, welcome to the show, Malinda Zehner Guerra.
All right, Malinda's a four-time Emmy-nominated editor. Welcome to the show.
Soon to be Emmy-winning.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
How did you get started editing, or what inspired you? How did that all go down?
It was not a straight line to getting to edit. I started in the business as an actor, spent a lot of time waiting tables and bartending, working at a headshot photo lab. And then I had done a film studies course in college as like a minor with my theater degree. So I'd learned a little bit of production and a little bit of editing on Premiere 3. Like we were on number 3 back. So like that's how old I am too.
Nice.
Just dated myself. We got rid of the numbers now. And so after a bit of time, I was kind of looking at what other things could I be doing to not, I didn't want to be.
You didn't want to be a waiter for
Didn't want to be a
years?
waiter forever. And I was like, after enough time, you realize this probably isn't going to happen. Like, it's not going to hit. Maybe you'll be who was the mom from Everybody Loves Raymond? Like Patricia Heaton. I think she didn't get that role until she was much older. Not much older. She was like in her late 30s or 40s. But you got to put in 20 years, even if she was doing small stuff all along the way. And I was like, I'm not even getting the small stuff. So like the idea that that's going to hit at some point probably was not going to happen. And I had liked editing. I had kind of helped friends with, cutting their actor reels and stuff. So I went back and did like a broadcast course, which was focused more on radio and then television. And we learned editing, but more from if you were going to be a newscaster and you'd be, go out in the field, do your stand up, shoot it, come back and put some B-roll in and cut your news package kind of thing. So we did Final Cut and Avid. So that's how I learned both those programs kind of at the same time. And just happened that my one of my friends who teaches editing now, but was working for a woman who had a bunch of commercials for the gas company. And he was like, hey, now that Avid, come be my assistant on we have these 60, 30-second spots we have to cut about winter safety. And so did that. And I was like, oh, this is actually kind of fun. You get that creativity. You also get the nice structure. I love a nice timeline with everything pulled down properly and color coded and organized. My Virgo brain gets that. So, and then I had another friend's husband who was a post soup, and they were looking for a night AE. And I was like, I can do that. Got hired and then found out I did not know what the syncing and grouping. I was like, yeah, I could do that. And then when I got in there and it's 10 cameras, I was like, oh, this might be a little bit over my head. But luckily there was the other night assist from their other show was like, I'll help you. poor thing, and managed to not get fired that first week. Like, I think I output something with like a huge Kodak that they needed to like do recreations, or like the Kodak wasn't on the guy's laptop and it was a mess on like a Saturday. And I was like, I'm getting fired, and didn't get fired and stayed there for a while and worked my way up to editor. And then, started moving around and getting on different shows. I started kind of with Shaw in that paranormal travel, ghost hunty adventure monster show stuff, and then moved more
so that was your first, you got in through the paranormal show kind of thing or whatever?
Yeah, the first show I did was called The Other Siders, and it was children's, it was like a teenage ghost hunters on,
was it Adult Swim or something?
Adult
like
Swim,
that?
yeah, something like that. So it was like, ghost hunters, but with like teenagers. And looking for ghosts, just kind of doing the same thing that Ghost Hunters did. So then eventually branched out into, the docu-follow, and then some competition, and, back to Naked and Afraid, getting more travel adventure, but less ghosts, more.
Were all these shows part of the same like company, or did you like meet people at different places and stuff like that?
Yeah, I moved around a bit. Like I started at Ping Pong, and then I moved over to Bunim/Murray. I was at Bunim/Murray for a good like 3 or 4 years, because they just have so many shows, so you can kind of just stay. Once you're in the fold there, they'll just keep putting on shows, which is great. You're like kind of permalance, and you don't have to think about where your next show is coming from, which is great.
Yeah.
But then I would get itchy, and I'd be like, I can't. I'm tired of this. And luckily, a producer from one of those paranormal shows moved over to Naked and Afraid at the very beginning, and then he called me up and he was like, "Hey, you should come do Naked and Afraid. We have like our like Excel spinoff series where it's like 40 days starting." And I was like, "Sounds great, let's do it." So I would go do Naked and Afraid for a bit, and then I did like Making It for NBC, like a competition show. I did some Drag Race. So it's like I'll go and come back, and kind of bounced around probably at like 4 or 5 different production companies over the years. Just whenever I would get tired of one thing, I'd go to another and then go back, so it would feel fresh. And that kind of helps to, just to have a variety of experience, because then you can be like, yeah, I can cut anything. And then eventually decided I was like getting into scripted, and did some indie features and short films.
Yeah.
And
we'll get into that.
And then finally made that jump. That was a few years, but definitely having all of those different genres helped, especially with Black Lady Sketch Show, because every sketch is completely different. So I could be like, oh yeah, I've cut this kind of comedy, and I've cut a horror show, and I've done this, and that applied to all the different sketches that we would do. So
what was your favorite reality show that you've cut?
I'll give you like a top 3 in no particular order. How about?
Okay.
I love Naked and Afraid. I do like that show a lot, because it is very real. They're dirty and gross, and they're literally starving.
I didn't come here to just keep the fire going, and it's starting to get pretty frustrating.
The survivalists are going through like real, like personal, like emotional growth and stuff while they're out there, like having realizations about like who they are and why they're doing this. And which makes it really, really cool. It's not always just about like eating bugs and stuff, but there's a lot of tears in this one. It's going to be good.
All right.
And then I did also love Drag Race.
Hey, all stars! If you want to earn your place in the Drag Race Hall of Fame, you better put your henny where your mouth is. She's a super queen.
You go from people who don't have any clothes on to these people who have like this amazing like makeup and clothes and artistry and all the stuff that they like come up with for their personas. And they're just super fun and funny and sassy. And, you get like the dancing and the lip syncing, and that was, from one end to the other. I feel like those two are really probably 2 of my faves, and then there's everything.
It's a great show.
A little docu-follow is always good once in a while.
I know when I first kind of started, people would be like, oh, you came from reality into scripted. They would kind of, not a superiority thing or whatever, but it definitely like,
I think it's still there.
okay.
it's getting less. And I think the more that editors who are able to make that jump from editing unscripted to editing scripted without going back to the AE position, it just shows then that it's possible and we can do it. And it's not, there's the whole like a needle drop versus a lyric up, where the terminology is different. And it's like, it feels like they're just trying to like trip you up. Like, why do you call it different things? It's the same thing. And, some of the workflows are different, especially I think it's with like the assists, like what assists do in reality is very different from what an assist handles in scripted. But so I feel like those kind of aspects, there's a learning curve that you feel a little insecure about. I know I did. But like the cutting is the cutting, like storytelling is storytelling. So as long as you tell me all the other like technical things that I need to know about, like who does this and who does that, like I can get in there and like cut your footage. That's not an issue. Like whether or not I know who to pass it off to properly or whatever is different. But and I think that there's more and more editors who are making that jump between from edit chair to edit chair, that people realize it can be done, and unscripted editors can cut scripted just as well as a scripted editor. And because sometimes what we do in unscripted is we're story producing too. Like we're writing from nothing. You have all this footage and you have to make the story. So I think, and you have to repurpose things or find things, we need somebody to say this or do that to make this work. And they didn't quite say that. So you have to like kind of be creative with how all that comes together. I think it ends up being a great skill to have in scripted, when in theory they've gone out there, they have a script, they have a vision, they know exactly what they want. And then you can just make that even better. Like, I feel like with scripted, it's like baking more, you have to follow the recipe. Mm-hmm. It's a little more like exact. And then, you're icing the cake and making it pretty and great, following a very strict recipe, where like unscripted is more like cooking. You can throw a little of this and you can throw a little of that in. Like measurements don't always matter. Maybe you want a little more salt, you want a little more spice, and like, so it's all cooking, but it's like one's maybe a little more patterned than the other.
Is there a show that you worked on before that kind of helped you story-wise a lot? Like just learning, just structurally, that kind of stuff?
All reality shows, I feel like as an editor, like obviously we do have story producers, but you're working with them. They always, give you a string out or whatever, and that's their initial idea for what it might be. But there's so many times where, I remember one time I was on doing something where it was like a restaurant conversation, and the woman said one thing kind of about her father passing or something with her mom. She kind of like drops it halfway, and then it doesn't get fully realized, and they move on. But then it became a storyline for the season. So they were like, no, this has to be where she establishes that her dad is dying or whatever it was. But she only said like one thing. And, you're like, oh, okay. So, it's like stuff like that where you really learn how to make it a story out of like scraps, or then like, okay, can pull, something she said from later. Yeah, I think, the unscripted stuff is really teaches you story.
Yeah, and how to craft it out of nothing. Yeah.
Doing all the paranormal shows, that help you with American Horror Story at all?
It did. My episode of American Horror Story, like Daphne was definitely a little bit more Black Mirror than horror.
Are you scared of me?
There weren't like the typical like jump scares or kind of like, no specter walking in the background or anything that you're like kind of scoring. So
okay.
It did, especially with like score and music wise, just to kind of know like how to lay that stuff in. But this one definitely was a little bit more straightforward. It was probably the least horror of the season. It was definitely more like Black Mirror, and we're dealing with like AI taking over or like becoming sentient. So it's a it's a different kind of horror. It's like what we're really dealing with in real life. Like, are the machines going to take over our jobs? And that's
that's a little too close to home, right?
Yeah, a little too close.
You can't really teach a machine yet to like understand emotion.
Yeah, emotion
Like,
and nuance, and
read someone's face. So I think that will save us for a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I think you have done a couple like indie features, right? Like, so you know that when you cut a feature together, you do it as close to the script as possible. You watch it, and you're like, "Wow, this is terrible," and then you have to redo
really
it.
Long.
Yeah, and really long,
or
so like
really short. I've had a couple that have been like, "Ooh, this is an hour 17, guys."
Oh no, okay. Well, like
short.
Well, that's why I always feel good, because it's like, even if they write it, they still don't know how it's going to go together. So like, there's still like nuance that needs to figure out and everything and stuff. So
yeah, and like, what is this scene really necessary? Does it add? Does it help? Can we find a way to cheat that information in another scene and just like move on and not have to have a whole nother scene dedicated to it? So yeah, and especially with indie stuff, it's like, and I've done a lot of things where it's like the writer is also the director, or the writer is the actor, so then they're very like close to it, and it's a little, you kind of have to be like, I don't really think we need this whole monologue. We could cut it out after the first like 3 sentences. Like that's what we need. And they're like can be very attached to stuff. So I think that's where you're also like a bit of a therapist, or have to have those skills of being like, I'm going to present this to you and pick your battles, like which one is more important overall, like what hill do you want to die on, what baby do you want them to sacrifice more.
So here we go, the number one question that everyone wants to know, or there's 2 big questions. Okay, number 1, how do you get a job, and 2, how do you get into scripted?
Yeah. How do you get a job and how do you get a script? Like, it's networking, right? It's your network for literally everything, Inscripted or unscripted. I think, like I said, my whole way of starting was through a friend needing help with commercial stuff, and then my friend's husband needing a night AE. For the most part, everything came, even in unscripted, through people I already know. Like, oh, hey, come do this, come like Naked and Afraid, or when I moved over to Buena Murray, it was another friend who was over there. He was like, you got to come do the show with me. So, and then making that move from scripted to unscripted has also been through like, people I had worked with in unscripted who had also made the jump. Steph Philo, and Daisha Broadway on Black Lady Sketch Show. Daisha earlier, she wasn't on my season, but she was kind of like one of the first. And then my friend Peggy, who is like the one of the producers now on American Horror Stories, but she had made the jump from unscripted over to Ryan Murphy as well, and then kind of was able to, like, after a while, and establishing like, hey, like I went from unscripted to scripted and I can do it, and I have former coworkers who I think would be really great here, and she was able, like, over time to bring a few of us along, and so it really is, and then even, continuing to like network and outreach with people just that you like the work on their shows. I reached out to another editor who cut Reservation Dogs and What We Do in the Shadows. And I was like, I love this show. It's so great. Like, and Zach Arnold has a whole like optimizer. He kind of helps people like navigate that. I have to obviously also massive props to Zach Arnold, who has created this massive network to help teach people how to navigate their career and stuff. Because definitely without, like, I did his class at the end of 2019. Like, we finished right at the beginning of COVID. I had written my first like networking email. I emailed the person. I emailed Nina, and she was like, "Yeah, let's meet for a drink." Met for a drink. Next weekend, everything shut down. And then, it felt like a weird time to be networking in 2020, but it was actually like would have been a really great time because people had time to like Zoom and chat. So yeah, and just finding those connections and getting to know people as like friends as well, because then then they think of you, I think, for those things. And you have to remember to like turn around and do that for the next person too. It's like, once I can establish myself and these people trust me and they know that I'm a good editor or someone they like to work with, that I can also be like, hey, well, this person, if you like me, you'll like this person, and help people make those jumps. I think that also that helps the flow from unscripted to scripted, kind of.
So the next thing is you have been nominated for 4 Emmys. So what is it like? What is it like the day that you find out? Like, how do you find out? Like what goes through your mind, kind of stuff like that.
It's fun. I'm not gonna lie, it's fun.
Hell yeah, of course.
When it happens. The first time, first one was for Naked and Afraid XL, and I wasn't a TV Academy member at the time. So that was somebody texting me and saying like, hey, because I couldn't look up the nominees, or I didn't even realize like we had been submitted or whatever it was, because I wasn't in the voting process. So then it was like, I think I was at Bina Marie, and like Born This Way had been nominated, and then somebody came across the hall and they're like, hey, we saw you got nominated for not our show, but great. Like, and you're like, what? And then, it's a crazy experience. They also like below the line, even at the Creative Arts Emmys, sometimes they don't really care about you. They're like, no, we just care about the actors. Like, you don't need to go on the, on the step and repeat. We'll just send you to the back. But, that's fun. And then
Nice.
it's fun to dress that up and go to the party and kind of be in a room with all those people.
It's a weird job having as an editor, because like there's sometimes like I'll meet actors on shows that I've been on, and I feel like I know them because I've seen their face every day for like months. And you're like, hey man, and they're like, I have no idea who you are. They're like, what's your name?
I totally did that to Valentina at that show. Like she had been on my season of Drag Race, and like she was right next to me, like walking in the theater, and I was like, oh my god, Valentina. And she like looked at me and I was like, oh, I cut Drag Race this season. You don't know me. Like, yeah, I love you. Okay, let's be bye. Yeah. Like, who are you? I sat with you every day for like months, and I know you, and that really great bite where you're so funny. I took that in. Yeah. So but that happens all the time. You're like, oh, do I know them or do I just know them from my job?
Yeah.
Okay, so about the sketch show, how exactly, like, do you come in and get to pick a sketch, or like what? How does that even, like let's say you sit down and they're like, oh, here's a sketch for you, or do you get to pick, or how does that whole process work?
It's basically, it's kind of just like a rotating thing. So Steph came in first. She was our supervising editor. She got the first sketch. And then I got the second sketch, and then it was just the two of us for 2 weeks while Taylor was finishing a movie, and then she came in. So then we would kind of like every third. But there were also some, because they have the whole, all the sketches written before they start shooting. So it was like, here's the sketches. And Gwen, our post producer, she loves a great grid and color coding, and it's so great. Like, so yeah, she'll have all the sketches and like what, when they were shot or when they're being shot, and then like color code, like this is Taylor's is purple and I was yellow and Steph is pink, and so we know kind of where we are. But then with sketch show, because there are some like returning sketches that come back every season or kind of every other season, like Steph had more of those because she'd been around for a few seasons. So like the Bible ladies ones, she had cut those first two, so she got the third, or maybe Daisha cut the first one, but she's done them subsequently. Taylor had a couple recurring characters that she had in season 3, so those would also be like priority, right? Like if it was your kind of character. And then then it was kind of just like alternating whoever, but then like Taylor did our basketball the basketball one, Baptism Runs on Duncan, because she had also done like the track one the year before, and kind of that was like she had created a really good style for like kind of the sports of it. So she, did that, and she did our like music video. So some of it's like if you also have like lean towards something a little bit. I had a horror like movie thing. Yeah, but some of it's just luck of the draw, which one you end up getting. And some of it, would be if there were like the legacy characters would go to the same editor because they had already established that style, and we're cutting so fast, like, especially with like the Bible ladies, some of those like push-ins and stuff, the way Steph has created that style of the camera movement is stuff that she added in post. So she knows that language, the visual language. So it's just like, that's hers. So.
Got it.
Yeah.
So in a sketch comedy show, like how much is, since you don't have a lot of time, how much is written and then how much improv is there and everything? And how do you kind of organize that?
Everything is written. So everything is fully scripted. And the way they would kind of do it on set is we would have like 2 or 3 as scripted takes, and then they would do what they would kind of call fun runs. So where they could improvise and ad-lib a little more, or if there had been an ad-lib in an earlier take that someone had done that they really liked, and then they would bring it back, in the reverse coverage or whatever. I think in one of my sketches, there was one of the guys had kind of ad-libbed about something about Shania Twain based on what the woman was wearing, and it was so funny that we had to pick it up later, and then that ended up in the sketch.
Sorry, Shania Twain.
Who are you calling Shania Twain?
That's what you look like. It's really giving Shania Twain.
You don't remember the music video? You look just like that. Is that not what you were going for?
You know what? I kind of can't unsee it now.
So they'll do fun runs. They'll do alt jokes and stuff because the writers are on set as well. So they'll be like, give alt lines, and then our assists are really great with like script sync. They'll kind of color code where there's also where there was an alt, so that we can go in and see like the as scripted, but also like where alts were, so it's like it's a mix of the two, because then you still want to give. Robin really wanted to see what was written. Definitely not like taking out any lines, but then so if there was an alt or a joke or an addition that you really liked, put it in, but or have it as like, this is how it was scripted, but I liked this better, and also have that to kind of present to her. Stuff like the WeWork sketch with the coral reefs that Steph did, which was our last sketch. It was like the entire cast plus like Tracy Ellis Ross, and there's 2 Warren Gang factions.
One more reply off from you, and I'm gonna unsubscribe you for life.
I mean, she gonna kill you.
It was also the last day of shooting. I think it went like kind of off the rails with just like complete improv, trying hard, like, and so many people. That stuff was like that one, and like the manger, like the Bible lady sketch was like there was enough outtakes and alt lines and riffing and improvising that those 2 sketches could have been a 30-minute episode alone. So then you have to like pare down and really kill those babies, right? Like, this is funny, but like that's funnier and it's gotta go. So.
And then how long would you get to cut a sketch?
It was about 3 days.
Okay. For like a 5-minute, 3 to 5 minutes?
Yeah, 3 to 5 minute for editor's cut. And then it would go to our director. And she had like a day or 2. Okay. And then we would go to producers, and that would be you could have a kind of a couple rounds of notes with them, and then all the sketches would get put into an episode. So the episodes aren't already pre-planned. Once all the sketches everything is shot, and we have them in some semblance of put togetherness. Maybe the last like 4 or 5 weren't cut. We had a big day where we sat down and we watched everything that had been cut, and that's when you kind of get out the like cards and start moving things around. Okay. And, you didn't want to have maybe 2 period pieces in the same sketch. You want to make sure you had like a guest star. in every episode. So that kind of like Tetrising with what made sense. And then we would still move things around, as the season went on. But
cool. Okay.
Yeah, so it all kind of comes together later for that. Like we had the interstitials are pre-planned. Those can't be moved because those build a story across the season. But aside from that, like everything was pretty mobile.
Nice.
When you're cutting a sketch show and a narrative show, like, do you still tackle it the same way or like different?
I think I still kind of cut it, attack it the same way. Obviously with sketch show, because it was like 3 days and then you're moving on, you would kind of do the whole process with the like rough cut, put the music in, polish it, send it off. Whereas if I'm doing like a longer piece, I like to just, and even in Unscripted, I kind of do my like rough cuts. I don't bother with music or any of that. Like I'll pass that over to my assist to do their like kind of sound design work, and then come back after to start the scoring. Cause that also, I feel like I need a little bit of like space from the initial pass to then be like, and like an unscripted as well. Like you cut this scene and you think like all of this is important, but then once you cut the whole episode, you're like, well, we talk about this here, so I don't need this here. I can lose that. Once I start putting the music in, then I'll be like, oh, I can tighten this, or I'd rather have a reaction there, or actually don't like this take. So that gives me like a second pass. But so with a sketch, because it's only 3 to 5 minutes and then it's got to go out the door and move on, all of that happens in 3 days. But for a longer piece, I'll do my whole rough cut and then go back and put the music in, and that gives me a second pass to kind of like hone things in or change takes or whatever. Then you realize like, oh, this reaction in this early scene won't make sense in this later because of the one I picked in the later scene. So which was the right like emotion that the actor was showing? Like, should he not be looking suspicious this early because we're just not there yet? But it seemed like a really great, it's the first scene you got and you're like, oh, it's such a dramatic look or whatever. And then you realize, oh, that's actually way too early for this. Like he's supposed to be happy still or whatever. And like take it out. But after you've seen how the whole thing is kind of play out.
What was your favorite sketch that you cut, and what was the most challenging?
My favorite was The Bold in the Cubicle, which was kind of our like office meets telenovela.
Hey, work wife! Daphne, how dare you show your face here after you jam my printer? No! Ah!
Starts out kind of like the office, and like these women are in an office, then it turns and like this dramatic, like everybody turns and suddenly they have accents and the lighting gets weird, and Gab has like just tear marks and they're so over the top. And that was super fun because my mom watched like Days of Our Lives back in the day, so it was like super fun to get that like over dramatic but just as bad as you wanted it to be, like acting out of the three of them. And then it was also fun to get to play around with like I used a lot of like flamenco and like Spanish guitar strums. Like they each kind of had, exactly. And we had scripted in like there were certain parts where they had written in like the dun dun dun, like they had something dramatic happen. So that was super fun because it was just like as over the top as they gave you could use. There was no like this was too big a reaction. There was nothing subtle about that.
But then you got to make sure it's not too small of a reaction, right? You
right? Yeah, like small would not work at all. Yeah, it was. So that was super fun.
Cool.
That was a really hard one. Our Doomteenth one was definitely challenging because it was all shot on green screen, and then we had to find the stock footage and the B-roll of what she was talking about.
Corporations have culturally appropriated Juneteenth. These corporations are putting raisins in your ancestors' potato salad. Yuck!
Visually, that was not super like planned out in the script. They had a couple things that they had noted along the way, but then you're like, it's a minute of the same background according to the script, and then there's a minute of this, and it's really boring. So how do we kind of change what's going on visually because of the green screen? And so that was like challenging, because you're pulling stock footage and what is this, whatever she's saying, what does that look like? We did have some VFX created for that as well. So I think that one was challenging just because it really was like a blank slate, and the visual world of it had to be created, which, the production design on Sketch Show was like so out of this world. Like they built like a whole, for the music video one, it was a whole airplane interior that they built, and to have like these dancers in, and it was crazy. So for a show that has such a strong visual look, and everything was so thought of, that to have a sketch that was basically a blank slate was definitely challenging. And it took us a while, like in post, like working with the producers to really kind of like figure out what that one was. That one went through a lot of iterations. So that was definitely a challenge. But I think it turned out really well. For like, it's supposed to be like a bad PSA. So there's like a little bit of that. Like she thinks she's giving like a real serious, but it's a little cheesy, but not, it can't be too cheesy, it has to be, So there was like a fine line.
Yeah.
Like how cheesy can the visuals be? She's really serious about what she's saying, but it's like, so it was a tricky one, but it was fun. In the end, it turned out really well.
So what's your process of when you first start a project or something?
I mean, at first day, the absolute panic.
Oh, of course. 100%.
Right? Yeah.
That's what I said. You're like,
that.
oh shit, this is what I thought it was going to be.
What am I doing here? Like, oh my God. Like empty bins everywhere. Shit. Just all this footage. If it's a show that's been around, like Sketch Show, obviously I rewatched everything that they had previously done, just to get a feel for like how they like their music and pacing, and that evolved over from season 1 to season 4 a lot. And then or with Horror Story, and Horror Story is like rewatching those, especially like the later seasons. Obviously Stories we were season 3, so it was easy to watch everything, but to just kind of get a feel for what like the overall way they like things done, right? I feel like Ryan Murphy, they love a good needle drop over there. Like music and score is so big. So for me, I was like already trying to like read my script, and I was trying to think of like reached out to the composer and the director to like, what kind of needle drops are you thinking? What kind of score are you thinking? Because we have Stories had a different composer on every episode, kind of based on what their previous work was and the tone that they were looking for, and kind of starting with that, and then just absolute panic, and then just I feel like you gotta just dive in, and I kind of like to go. I just go with the first take and start, because I like to see everything. Like even in Unscripted, like a story producer will give me their string out, and I'm like, but what happened around this? Like I still need to dive back in, kind of get a feel for what was happening a little bit broader before I can be like, okay, this is the best stuff, right? Or this is the lean meat. And I've found, and I think it changes from show to show. Like sometimes what you've done on one show, you realize doesn't work for the way another show. But I kind of like to do, and it's a little time consuming, but especially right now, I do like a line by line string out. So I'll watch every take, and I'll put like this guy's line, first line, and then her line and his line and her line, and all in a string out from take one, kind of like, the wides reversing through the day. So that way I can also go back when I go and I can just watch all the takes of that one line and be like, I'll note which ones I liked the best when I was initially watching. And then after I've gone through everything, I'll be like, okay, well, I know I want to start in the wide here. So I can just look at the wides, but also that way I can see every version of the line, that way if you have to like swap out because somebody like mealy mouthed a word, you have it all right there. And then I found that was really helpful too when you get into producer sessions and they want to look for other takes. It's like
you got the string
they're
out.
all right here. I can
hit
play and you can watch every single one. So it's a little bit, I feel like it's time consuming at the beginning, but then at the end or when I'm going back through, like it's all there. I don't have to like click through and look for things, or even with script sync, which is amazing. And I don't know how we would do it without it, but like even you're not sure if have I clicked on this one? Have I clicked on this take? Like which one? So I like to have it all like self-contained like that. So, and then just kind of after I've done that, just start building away, and then based on what some of my like favorite takes were.
In my time editing, I've kind of noticed there's like, there's different type of editors. There's editors that like to like block everything out. They're like, okay, I know that I want a wide at the beginning and then I want to go into this shot, but they don't know which take they want. They just know like, I know I need this shot for this line, and they'll kind of build a scene that way. And then I've had editors that go in and just kind of like literally go line by line and just kind of, construct it by that. It takes a little longer, but they know exactly why they're doing, each thing and everything. And then you have like, I don't really know what to call them. I call them tinkerers, but basically like their cuts are terrible. And then out of nowhere, they just turn into like masterpieces. And you're just like, where the hell? Like you watch I'll watch like an assembly with them. And I'm like, dude, this is a lot. You need a lot of work. And then the next day you see it, you're like, well, where was this? Like, why didn't you? Like, yeah. So I was just wondering, like, and I call them tinkerers because like, it's like it starts out bad, but then it gets progressively better the more it refines it and everything. And that's kind of like the process of editing. But I was just wondering if you notice the same thing, or if you could say you kind of do something similar to that or something different.
I think I'm like a line by line person, for sure. Especially the way I do that. Like I know I had read, now I can't remember his name. I read his book and he did a ton of comedy stuff. He cut like Veep, and I think he did something with MPEG, and he was talking about like an interview video thing, and he was saying that he would basically just take the circle takes, like the last take of each setup or the wide or whatever it was. And that's what he would use. It sounds like probably a tinker, like you were saying. And and then he would constantly go through and just put in the circle takes. And then he would, I need a close up on this person here. I don't like this line here. And like change it that way. And for one sketch on Sketch Show, I kind of tried to start doing it that way, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. No, like this is insane. How do you figure out what's going on, and how do you know what the takes are? So no, I'm definitely like a line by line person. Or if there's like a chunk of a take, obviously you're gonna like look at what the circle takes or what the director kind of liked on set, so you know what their idea was. But you don't know what the right reaction shots are going to be to that person's lines and stuff. So I think, I like to build it all like that based on like the best take of each thing. And then you're like, oh, well, their head's wrong here, or their delivery changes, and then you go in and like refine like that. But
gotcha. So you're literally every line you have a sequence for, and you have all the takes of that line.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Each line.
But what about like the reaction shots and stuff like that? Are you putting?
So I'll have the other person's coverage, like, and so I would keep the other characters' coverage in there, even if it wasn't their line. So then I could see the reaction, and then,
gotcha. Okay.
Or then expand, like, also be able to be like, then match back in and see what was happening around that. If I wanted to be on them early, or do I just want to be on them for the other person's whole line, because what's on their face is more important than the line delivery kind of thing. But so I'll have the coverage of the other person,
gotcha,
even if it's not their line in that string out, so I can literally like for line 14 or whatever, I have all the takes and all the coverage.
Wow.
So then I can kind of, then it's like nice and contained. And also, yeah. And then when someone's like, I want to see the all takes of this, I can just like pull that up and it's like everything's there and we can just watch it all.
On American Horror Story, when you get your episode, you read the script and you're already thinking about music and sound design and stuff when you're doing that. So, so do you go straight to your music supervisor and the composer, or the composer hasn't been picked yet for that episode, or like?
No, we had our composer already, and music supervisor. So, I talked to the composer too to be like, what kind of score are you guys thinking for this? Because it was, also, like I say, because it was more Black Mirror and more just like a bit more a psychological thriller. It was like, it's not your traditional like horror stabs and stuff like that. Like what? So he sent me some stuff of his from his like back catalog that he was thinking would be in the right vein. And then we also were using for temp like Basic Instinct. So that kind of like film noirish. We didn't want to get too Herman Miller-y, but that as well, like
not the crazy like horn stuff, but all the
not too Vertigo. Plus they had already done like Ratchet very much in that vein, so we kind of went more towards like Basic Instinct, so that kind of vibe, and we ended up with a lot of like harp and stuff. So I talked to him about because he had already discussed that with Alexis too. So they had a kind of a plan for what they wanted to hear. And then I talked to our music supervisor too, to say like, this is what we're thinking. And she was great about just pulling that so that we had it all properly too, as opposed to like grabbing stuff off the internet where you don't know where it came from. Everything was, I was like, I want some classical music for this scene. And I want like, and I was even said like, what's something like kind of like twisted and fucked up about death, but you're only going to know it if you're like a classical music person. And I was like, I'm not. So you probably know. And she's like, oh, I gotcha. Here's the Mozart, right?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So like, and just ask, she would pull those soundtracks for me, and that way it was all like in, and we knew everything was like properly organized. And then the needle drops that we were going through, I just had her pull them, and that kind of kept everything streamlined. Also too, so we're not like you take so much time to like cut things in. I don't want to like pull something off YouTube and then have to like, if we stick with that, like especially a needle drop, have to have it recut. So it just makes it's more efficient, I think, to just go through like the music supervisor, because they know what you have,
so they know.
And they can also be like, that's really expensive. And you're like, okay, cool, like let's not use that. The Beatles? Sometimes she would be like, just so you know, like I asked her a couple of things, she was like, this is how much that costs, and I was like, oh, no, we don't need that. I was just guessing. Like, just
no problem.
This is just a list. So give me the cheaper stuff.
Put it on my tab.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's an hour long. So you guys had 10-day shoots, and
it's out now. So everyone go watch it. It's episode 2, right? Episode 2. Everyone go watch that.
Yeah, it's like 42 minutes is like the sweet spot. I think we were, so that was what we kind of aimed for.
Okay, so that's what I was gonna say. Like the editor's cut probably came in at like 55 minutes an hour. And you're just like, oh, you can feel it kind of thing, or
it was definitely slow, a little like we definitely paced it up a lot. The director on set too really wanted the actors to like kind of like take their time with reactions and like listening, especially with like we had a couple of scenes that were like phone calls. So, left that kind of breathe in the editor's cut. And then once we got it all together and started with the director's cut, it was like, oh, we gotta pace this up a bit. So made things a little tighter and trim the fat in that way. And
So that first cut has music and everything in there.
Yeah.
And sound effects.
I mean, in theory,
sound design.
It could go right out the door. Obviously it's not colored and all that, but like you could send it if needed. But that was all like, temp score and stuff. The composer, once we got past, you get past the director's cut, then we would also pass things over to the composer. And then he would start, we would do a sound spotting with him, and then he would start working on things. And, you know, there were some scenes where it would be like, yeah, we like this, but maybe this cue is a little too heavy handed, a little more subtle here. Maybe we needed something bigger somewhere else, but like it gave the foundation for him to play off of. And we had those discussions about like what the style of music already was. So at least that was like, it wasn't a huge change as it went along.
So then by the time it gets to Ryan Murphy, how close to a finished product is it?
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Okay.
It had pretty much all the score. I think maybe the first time Ryan saw it, we were waiting on something for a very end piece, but yeah, it's pretty much presented to him as like, we think this is
what's going to air.
What's going
like,
to
what
air.
do you think? Yeah.
Yeah. And then he goes through and does his notes, and then it'll go to the network. So the network sees his approved version.
How long would it take you to do one episode? Like how long from the time you start looking at dailies till you like deliver it, your final cut? Like how long do you think it is?
I started at the end of May, and we finished, it was a little, I think I finished kind of the end of August, beginning of September. So like three months, but with the strikes, there was some like holding when we thought things might be coming back. And, you know, so I think that kind of, there was some lag, waiting around to see what happened time. So probably would have been a little quicker, because we would have had more episodes coming at us. Like we only had the 4 to do because we couldn't shoot anymore. So the last 5 were, you know, put on to be done when all of this is over. So it kind of gave us a little more time to like work on things, because we weren't, you didn't have 9 episodes or whatever going at the same time.
I don't know if you have any tips in general, like people getting started or moving up, or what would be your advice? I
think you just have to start somewhere, like, especially if you want to edit, you know, like take that post-PA job, take a logger for a reality show or whatever, like just kind of get your foot in the door and get the experience. Cause like you got to have experience. And then I think on some level, like know where you want to go. And, you know, if your ultimate goal is to cut Marvel features, like you got to get in the door somewhere. So maybe that is being a PA or an AE at like an unscripted space. But then once you get that experience, like start trying to meet the people who would help you move over to features, and then get in that path like as soon as you can. Like know what your end goal is, but also like don't turn up being an AE on an unscripted show because it's not like your ultimate goal. You need some experience somewhere. And then, you know, so always be trying to like work towards what you want and trying more and more to hone in and be in that same path. But like, you know, I think I've learned so much in unscripted that I can apply to scripted editing, and like have so many more tricks, and have cut such a variety of stuff that I don't know, you know, if you just get into a certain lane in scripted too, it's like you can get pigeonholed in scripted as well, right? Like if you're cutting a procedural, like you can get stuck in a network procedural. That might not be what you want. So like you got to kind of really know what your end goal is. And maybe you do want to be on like a you know, NYPD Blue that's going to go 20 years, and you're going to have like a great like structured life, you know, your September to May, and you could take your summer off, and that's great for having kids or whatever. But like, but if you really want to be on those Marvel shows, at some point you're going to have to move over into that lane, but also get as much experience cutting as much stuff as you can, or do small projects on the side so that you can have different varieties of experience. Because you also don't know what you're going to need. Like, you know, from the outside, you're like, oh, Black Lady Sketch Show, it's a sketch comedy show, but each sketch is its own genre. Like I had a sketch that was a Bridgerton-based sketch. We were using, you know, the Bridgerton string quartet, like back that ass up in the string quartet. Like, so we were going off that that style, and then you're turning around and doing like a horror podcast. So I had experience doing like horror stuff and like comedy. It's not just comedy. So and sometimes you don't know what's going to be. You may be cutting a drama show, but it has like real, like dark comedy aspects to it. You need to kind of know how to cut that pacing too. So I just think the more you can tricks you can have and styles you can cut, and, you may think you want to do one thing and then you discover you actually like something totally different. Cause when you're coming out of school or just starting, you don't know all the options. So people don't limit yourself.
Would you suggest lots of side projects?
I mean, yeah, if you can, if that's what you want to do though, too. Like if you need to fill those gaps, then like side projects can be great, but they're also like, it's exhausting. If you're working like a full 50-hour week and then you're cutting something on the weekend, and you also have to know when it's like diminishing returns, when your brain power is just not there anymore, especially as you get older. You're like, I can't do these like, and I know there's like people, especially with working from home and during the pandemic, like who were like double dipping and working on 2 shows at once. And I was like, I could not.
There's no way.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
I'm like,
I feel like
I am dead at the end of the day. So
a lot of AEs can do that. I feel like they kind of, it's easier, I think, but
yeah, especially if you're later on and all your footage is in, you can move on to another. But yeah, I would hear about like editors or story producers who are working on 2 shows, and I'm like, how do you do that? Like, what, you're working 20 hours a day? Like, it's not worth it. But
yeah,
a lot of shortcuts.
To each their own. Yeah, but yeah, sometimes you have to do side projects, and it's exhausting. And then, but I think that helps to say, like, I think it also just shows, especially I think for like when I was trying to make that transition, it's like, and I would go in for interviews or whatever, I'd be like, yeah, like I know I don't have the like recognizable network credits that you want, but I do have these indie or short films that are very like your show. So like I know I can do this style because I've done this.
And, that's good. Wow.
When I went in to like for my like with Black Lady Sketch Show, I had just done a 4-episode web series, like super like comedy web series. So it was like, I just cut this like great comedy web series. It's like X, Y, and Z. This is what it's about. And it's like, oh, great. Yeah, you're cutting comedy. Great. So it's like that kind of check that box. So I think it's like, even if it's not, obviously everybody looks at your resume and they just want to know the names on the resume. But when you have to kind of go in and sell yourself, I think it just that helps to be like, yeah, it's like, I know it's not exactly what you want, but I do have this thing. So it's like, it's close or it's like it. So just the more like tools, whether it's like technical tools, like I'm really good at After Effects. And so I'd be really good on a VFX heavy show. If that's, you want to get into like a superhero show. For me, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I would need an AE that's really good at that, because that's not my jam. But if that's what you want, like you need to have those like tools to kind of be like, no, I can do all your green screen stuff. I can do that like VFX heavy stuff. I understand, because I did like a short thing or whatever it is. So
gotcha.
I think it's just whatever you can use to pitch yourself is only going to help. So
I gotta say, looking at your resume, this might be the most diverse. We're looking at IMDb here.
You've done everything. You've done every kind
that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I don't want to be pigeonholed.
Thank you so much for
thanks for being on for so long.
Chatting with you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you. I hope it was fun. Thank you. I love it.